Welcome to the Whole Pack, where we challenge black and white thinking and holistic pet care and dive into the controversial topics everyone's thinking about but nobody's saying out loud. I'm Sunny Gandera.
And I'm Melissa Sherman, and we are two holistic pet health practitioners here to prove that holistic care can include critical thinking, self care, and yes, even Western medicine when needed. This is a judgment free community we wish we'd had when we started our journey.
Hi, welcome back to the Whole Pack. I'm Melissa Sherman.
And I'm Sunny Gandera.
And this is episode 3, and we're going to be talking about disagreement with grace. And I'm really excited about this topic. Why is this topic so important, Sunny?
I think this was very prominent in our discussions before we started the podcast. Is like we were just kind of tired of seeing this in not just holistic wellness industry, but every industry, right? In human health, pet health, you have to be all in one camp or you're the enemy, right? You're either raw feeding or you're poisoning your dog. You're either anti-vax or you're a big pharma shill, right? There's no nuance. There's no middle ground. And I think we both agree, and of course, this is disagreement with grace, right? So it's kind of funny, but we will put some examples out there. Is that this black and white thinking really shuts down conversation, and it really shuts down our ability to grow as practitioners and to listen. And even if you initially agree with someone, give them a little bit of time to explain why they disagree with you. Keep an open mind. And that can be really hard when you're very committed to something, right? And you may have had some successes with some of your clients with this, but it really does shut down learning. Because the second someone perceives that you're on the wrong side, they stop listening to anything you have to say, right? Even if you have valid points, even if you have experiences that could help them, right?
Yeah, and part of having a civil conversation is really understanding how they got to that decision. How did they get there? Um, so we'll just jump right into one of the hottest topics that we hear, and that's vaccination.
Mm,
So, both Sunny and I do agree on what that looks like, but we both had clients that maybe aren't in agreement with us.
mm.
So, Sunny, like, do you have an example of what that might look like, or how has that gone for you when you present them with something
Mm,
and they say, "Well, this is what I do and this is what I want to do." How do
mm.
you go on from there?
I start first and foremost with respect and an open mind when I hear a client maybe disagreeing or doing something different. So my approach to vaccination is what I call cautiously minimal, if you will. I believe in the core vaccines when they're puppies, like rabies, distemper, parvo, but I don't believe in revaccinating on every year, like on a set schedule, without assessing that individual animal's needs. So I am a big fan of titer testing. Of course, we can't do that with rabies, not allowed in any state in the U.S. as far as I know. But there are clients of mine who do, out of whether it's fear or comfort, or they do vaccinate every year. So what I can do is I can inform them about vaccine, regular vaccines or yearly vaccines, the risk of that. Not huge risk for most animals, but risk nonetheless. We know that over vaccination can contribute to chronic inflammation and autoimmune, issues, and even cancer in some cases. But instead of like fear mongering, if they are hell-bent on doing it every year, let's focus on what we can do then. And that is perhaps, detoxing them, giving them some support around, their vaccination schedule so that the effects are as minimal as possible. And then, I also continue just to kind of plant seeds, but I feel like the most important thing is that it has to come from the pet parent has to be sort of convinced themselves. Like I can't convince them if that's really something they feel comfortable with. And I feel like that's really difficult for us practitioners, as I mentioned in the beginning, is really to kind of hold space for that part of them, right? When we think, oh my gosh, I know now why maybe that's part of why they're having seizures or things like that, right? But we can't uh, you know, uh, basically disrespect their choices. And it could also be that, for instance, I don't give my dogs heartworm, but I also live in the northeastern United States. Someone like you're living in the thick of Florida, that is a real concern. So we always have to look at
Right.
the individual cases and not be so committed to the theory versus the actual reality of where that pet lives and how they're being raised and as such.
So, as I see as a practitioner, our role is really empowerment, informing them. We're not there to control their decisions. We're not there to make decisions for them. I know some people do want us to make decisions for them, but at
Yeah.
the end of the day, what our role is to listen, give
Mm.
them the tools they need to make the best decision, because that's a perfect example. The heartworm, weighing that is, yes, the heartworm preventatives they have risks, there can be side effects, long term things can happen. Like there's a lot of things with it. But what does it look like if you're in a high risk area and a lot of dogs contract heartworm here? Then what?
Mm.
All of those beliefs that we're carrying with us, if we're like this, it's dangerous, and I'm covering my ears, but it's dangerous. I can't hear you. You can't do this. If you do this, I'm not going to work with you. Rather than being more open and saying, okay, so if you
Mm.
do want a vaccine every year, that's where you feel safe. If you do want to give heartworm preventative, that's when our role shifts now. Now we have this extra factor in there. And what does that look like? What can we do now to support them with this extra factor? Think of
Mm.
it as that, just an extra factor. Okay, so we know how to detox. We know how to give them a good diet. I mean, we know how to support this dog that is getting this extra vaccines and all we can do is educate them and give them that
Mm.
information. But energetically, if we're scaring them into doing something or bullying them into doing something that we believe, what does that do to the household? What does that do to that person? They might be
Mm.
resentful. They might be living in fear now. All that's going to trickle down to the animal who we're trying to help. So
Mm.
I think as a whole, the more we can listen and you can disagree, you can tell them, okay, I would probably do this way, but that's it. Leave it.
Mm.
Let them make the decision. We're not making decisions for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, it goes back to really it just, if they choose to do something, then we have to just be there for them. Like you said, keeping that, holding that space for them, and at the same time, seeing what we can do versus what we can't do. But there are diseases, of course, like parvo and distemper I mentioned, in areas where vaccination rates have dropped. We see that, and those diseases can be devastating. But then there are other vaccines, and I won't specifically mention things because it's not a specific scenario, but that may not do anything, right? So again, it's about real change, I believe, happens from within. And so if we can be there for our clients and just kind of give little nudges of information, or here's the latest research on that. And maybe there's research that doesn't necessarily support our full-on stance, but like if we can have a real conversation with our client, and I think they would be more open to listening than if we were just like, oh my god, you're giving them this, forget it, your dog's gonna die, like, of course that's very exaggerated. None of us, hope, would say that, but my point is meeting them where they're at, and also with some grace will do a whole lot. And I think that it can be super super difficult when we're very passionate about something, right? But that's the whole idea of this, is like, how do we disagree with grace? How do we keep that open ear and mind to someone who may think completely opposite of what we do?
Yeah. And that separate binary thinking is also what makes it so overwhelming for the animal parents to really navigate the system, because they may be following someone who does it one way and then someone who does it the complete opposite way. And
Mm.
again, we're blurring that, well, where's the individual in all of this? And you're listening to this and you're listening to that, and now you're just stuck and frozen because you don't know how to move, because well,
Yeah.
they both sound right. They both seem right, but who's right? And then it's about helping them come back and say, okay, for my dog, where I
Mm,
live, my lifestyle, our
mm,
diet, what we're doing, this is going to be the best. So it's about helping them navigate those two extremes of what to do and
yeah.
finding that middle ground that's comfortable for them.
Mm,
Because you don't want to do something that's comfortable for you, but really uncomfortable for them, because it's not going to be helpful. They're either not going to
correct.
do it, or is a lot of things could happen, right?
Well, put yourself in your pet parent's position because, we actually had this conversation recently when I had a situation with my dog. And I was like, I can't really, I don't want, I want to be careful not to let my fear make my decisions for me. But when I'm so close to it, when it's my pet, I can't, I can't like think clearly almost. And maybe that's your client, the pet parent's situation too. So that's why I'm really glad we're having this conversation because and I appreciate your approach as well as a practitioner because you're not dogmatic. You're not saying never vaccinate or never have heartworm. You're just saying assess that individual dog or cat and make an informed choice. And I think that if we meet the pet parent with that approach, I think they'll be much more like, oh, okay, I can breathe. I mean, give them permission to just kind of think, like feel into what's right for your dog and your cat. And I think that is just so important. And as practitioners, we need to be able to do that and not because I know we all want to desperately help, and fix. And oh my gosh, we want to look good. And I got this dog healthy, but it's not always black and white, never black and white. And it's the road isn't a straight arrow up. It's always got these, little creaks and crooks onto the way to good health, right? So I think that um being the bigger person and maybe sometimes admitting like I don't have all the answers, maybe this wasn't the right approach. That can be valuable sometimes, you know?
No, it definitely can be.
Yeah, yeah. And so the vaccination, of course, is a very hot topic. That's why we brought that one up. But of course, there's so many other, not smaller things, but nutrition wise, and in terms of like we were discussing before we got on the podcast, it's like, is it more important, like for a human, for instance, do you eat vegetables, or no, I can't afford organic, so I'm not going to eat vegetables at all, right? Like, so a dog parent might say, I can't afford to feed raw or buy raw food, or, I don't have time to cook. I can feed kibble, but what can we do then to add to that, right? So maybe some toppers, things like that. Like, how can we disagree with the kibble, but let's again meet that pet parent where they're at.
Right. And just offering them the tools to support them where they're at, where they can start. Because financial constraints are a real thing. So shaming them, what is that going to do to them? They're not going to have
Absolutely.
any answers. They're not going to be able to move forward. They're not going to be able to make slight improvements, because by saying no, it's all or nothing, or no, if you're feeding any kibble, we're not going to have this conversation anymore.
Mm.
You're shutting them down to a place where now they're alone again. Now they're
Yeah.
trying to navigate this stuff alone. And I don't think that's beneficial to the person, but it's definitely not beneficial to that animal. Because what if it is just about adding toppers, and that's where they can start, whether it's that's all they have energy for,
Mm.
or that's all they have money for.
Yeah.
You're going to start to see improvements, and it may take longer to get them there, but chances are better that they're going to start transitioning to a better diet over time, because of those small improvements are going to show up. I mean, toppers alone can be really beneficial. But of
Hmm.
course, when you start to see those things like, wow, their poop is so much better. We talk about poop a lot.
I know.
But
Our favorite topic.
right. But it's like little things. It's like, well, I want to do more now. So it's almost
Mm.
encouraging to where they're coming to cooked or raw food from scratch is really overwhelming to a lot of people. So peeling it back, let's start here and do
Yeah.
this for a few weeks. Then
Yeah.
let's revisit each other and like see where we can go from there. So even if it's little steps, you're making improvements that are going to help that dog or cat in the end.
Yeah. So I think, bringing it back to this whole, topic of disagreement with grace is that, what we may lack a little bit in this industry is like the ability to keep staying curious, keep staying open and knowing that we can learn from every single person, because I see a lot of like, people who have reached a certain status and they're just like, well, it's my way or the highway. And then that's really dangerous because there's new research coming out every year. I mean, I can think of so many, I'm not going to detail them out, but of like things we did that, oh yeah, this is the best for XYZ. And then, research shows later on, like years later, that no, oh my God, this was terrible. And so that's why we have to stay humble and flexible and open. I'm not saying that we don't ever have a good protocol or suggestion to our clients. Of course we do. And many of us, most of us, I think, would like improve our clients' life 10 times by things that we've learned throughout our holistic journey. But the danger becomes in thinking we've got all the answers and there's nobody else who can teach us anything. And that is really, really dangerous. And at least, if we think like, oh, I can only learn from such and such or this source, and staying close to other sources, that also I've experienced can be really dangerous. So we just want to, encourage you all as pet professionals to again, just keeping that open mind, asking questions. Don't be afraid to ask what you may think is a stupid question or be controversial, because that's how we learn. That's how we grow, right?
Right. And it's about approaching situations with curiosity, clarifying questions, respect, really listening. Even if you
Mm.
disagree, don't be just ready to jump and argue.
Yeah,
Listen, to take it in, to absorb it, instead of hearing, waiting to respond as to why they're wrong. So there's that
exactly.
difference of just sitting and listening, even if you disagree. Take it in.
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
if
And
you have something to say, like really think about it, where you're feeling that in your body, and is it something that's necessary to say or not? I mean, you can have a disagreement without having an argument and getting to this point where we're blocking each other, we're never talking to each other again.
yeah,
It's because that's what it is there's so much finality to things too. It's like
yeah,
you can't disagree and just move on with your lives. It's a disagreement and an end of relationships, whether that's professional or following somebody on the internet and just like, wow, I don't agree with what they said. I'm unfollowing them and I'm blocking them. I mean,
right.
of course, some things, sure, but like when it's just a topic you disagree with, like maybe just be open to where they're coming from.
Yeah, I love that. I think like back to like the intellectual humility, if you will, I feel is so undervalued. And we think we have to know everything to be trustworthy, but actually like admitting what we don't know sometimes builds more trust, right? We've talked about this. And I think that as you were talking, I was thinking about something a business coach told me that I could apply to this, is like looking for the and instead of the but, right?
Yeah.
So like, for instance, it's not vaccines are safe, but they have risks. That vaccines are safe and they have risks. I'm not saying all vaccines are safe, you know what I mean? But this is just an
Yeah, yeah.
example. Both things can be true. It's a small shift in language, but it changes everything. It keeps you more open. It doesn't shut down thinking. It allows for that, complexity instead of forcing that binary thinking. So
Yeah, that's a very good point.
yeah, yeah. Well, what I was thinking, like, is there a time when disagreement becomes unhealthy? Like, what are the red flags? We kind of touched upon it, but
I really think it's for me, when I start to feel emotion getting involved, that's where I have to check myself because now it's turned into something where it's becoming informative to like, I'm emotionally invested in this and why. I mean, that's where I pause and I'm like, hold on a second.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
what now I'm coming from my heart and we have facts, we have science, we have cases that we can like base our information off of. But when we start getting emotionally invested, are we making the right points anymore, or have we strayed to something that we're tied to an outcome of this conversation that maybe it's not as healthy anymore? How about you?
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
for me, it's when someone stops listening, as I mentioned earlier, when they're just like waiting for their turn to talk and they're dismissive of whatever you're saying without even trying to understand. Like, when it becomes about being right instead of finding the truth, right? Or Or
Yeah.
I would say we haven't discussed that yet, but like when personal attacks start, which we see all the time, right? It's like
Mm.
someone bringing another person down to bring their viewpoint up. I really just don't think that's very healthy. When someone starts attacking your character instead of engaging with your ideas, the conversation is pretty much over, right? So,
Right.
yeah,
Agreed.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Sometimes, agreeing to disagree can be a healthy, respectful ending too.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, this was great. I don't know if there's anything else, anything we missed out on. Of course, this topic can be really, we want to engage with you listeners as well. So if you have a take on what you think is healthy and unhealthy disagreement, we'd love to hear. Again, this is about discussing, and you don't have to agree with us for sure. We love to hear all viewpoints, but just always start by asking what someone believes and why. Try to understand their perspective first. That doesn't mean you're going to change your opinion. It just means that you're open, and maybe you will learn a thing or two, as we said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
just sharing it's perspectives. We all came to something because of an experience or something that we've learned. So really truly understanding that because we may have based everything that we're saying on something because we haven't experienced something else yet. So sometimes
Right.
just being curious and listening and hearing that you may soften your hard view on something because you're now allowing a different perspective to come in instead of like, I'm right. This is my lived experience. This is the only experience, right?
Right.
How do we reach across that table and say, well, I want to hear your experience too. I want to understand how you did this because maybe I'll change my hard stance on something just by being open. And that's what it is, right? It's an openness to dialogue, to understanding, to listening.
For sure. I mean, and if we can't do that as holistic practitioners and hold space for different perspectives, like how can we expect our clients to, right? So we kind of have
Totally
to
agree. Yeah.
walk our talk. And again, that intellectual humility, as I mentioned, I just, saying that I don't have all the answers and that's okay. I'm still learning and I
Yeah.
know quite a bit, but there's still things that I may not, have been exposed to, as you were saying. So from recognizing that someone else's uh, experience might be just as valid as yours, that's even if it's different, I think that's a huge part of it.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, there's always new research coming out. There's always new perspectives to consider. So it is really important to stay open so we can evolve with the industry
Mm,
instead of staying stuck in beliefs that may be antiquated. They may not
mm,
be the most up to date, the most current things. They are studying dogs more and more. So,
yeah.
I mean, there is so much more research coming out. And the only way that we can really take that in is by being open to listening to it.
Yeah, and listen, you don't have to pick a side, right? I mean, you can
Right.
be integrative, like you can see value in multiple approaches. I think that's what I'm missing a lot. I kind of cringe when someone is just like, oh, la, la, no, I'm here and I'm not going to go anywhere no matter what happens. I
Yeah,
think that was, a huge in sort of picking this topic, don't you think?
I think so. Yeah, and just
Mm.
I think you mentioned early on just the emergencies and we're not doing things because we're so afraid and because we're thinking like this, we can't do that. I can't have antibiotics. I can't do this or that. Like there's so many things that if we start putting the fear blinders on, there
Mm.
may be a situation that it is needed. But because we're like this, now we don't know how to help them because we've cut that whole side off.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are walking our talk, so we'd love to hear from you. Where do you disagree with us and what we've said today? We'd love to hear from you. Like, what did we get wrong? What do you think? What perspectives are we missing? What topics do you want us to handle next? And, engaging with curiosity is what we want you guys to do. Ask us why we believe what we believe, challenge us, and we'll do the same to you. What's your big takeaway from this episode and from today?
I think just approaching conversations with an open heart and being okay with other people's having differing opinions. Just it's always an openness and connection is
Yeah.
really my biggest takeaway is stopping yourself when you think you're getting too emotional because it's not about that. It's about listening.
Yeah, absolutely. For sure. Thank you so much for participating in this conversation, Melissa, even though we didn't disagree too much today. But hey, maybe that'll change in a future episode, right?
I look forward to the discussion.
Yeah, so that with next episode, episode 4, we're going to be talking about holistic isn't holy. Ooh, it's a very hot topic. It's when Western medicine may have a seat at the table. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be a good one. We're going to talk about maybe when pharmaceuticals are necessary, when diagnostics save lives, and why integrative care is the goal. And again, seeing both sides, holistic and conventional, and maybe we can meet in the middle. So definitely let us know what topics you want us to tackle, as I mentioned, where you disagree with us. And then, of course, don't forget to look us up on social media, like this episode, share with others. The whole pack, we're on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us.
Before we go, we want to remind you that the information shared on the whole pack is for educational purposes only and is not intended to replace veterinary medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult with your veterinarian before making any changes to your pet's diet, supplements, or healthcare routine. Every animal is unique, and what works for one may not be appropriate for another. We're here to empower you with knowledge, but your vet is your partner in your pet's individual care.